Chapter 1, Part 1A, The Watcher of Silence. Scene 1. When the earth held its breath. It began with a stillness so dense that even thoughts froze in place. The world remained, but everything that once moved had gone silent. No wind, no wheels, no hum in the metal veins of the city, as if something ancient, hidden, and heavy had risen to listen. You stood in the middle of the street. The cold made your skin thin, almost transparent. The air smelled of stone, rust, and old rain. Beneath your shoes, the ground did not feel dead, but waiting. A faint echo in the deep. A pulse that didn't belong to you. You looked up at the buildings. They leaned toward one another like sleeping beasts. Their windows were black, yet in each pane shimmered a pattern. A circle, 3 dots, a spiral. You had never noticed them before. When you took a step, something answered beneath the ground. A sound so low it could only be felt in bone. A word without language. A rhythm without tempo. It isn't empty here, you thought. It's only very, very still. The air thickened. In the corner of your eye, movement. A shadow against the wall, tall and narrow, not threatening, but immovable. When you turned, there was nothing. Yet the ground beneath your feet struck one deep beat, like a heart within stone. You walked on, one step, then another. Each was met by a deeper sound. And you understood. The echo was not returning from you. It was the earth itself. It was breathing. Slowly, like a watcher waking from sleep. You placed your hand against the wall. The frost there began to melt in a pattern, just like the symbols in the windows. 3 dots, a circle, a wave. As your fingers traced them, they glowed faintly, and you heard it again. That low, warm tone, not dangerous, only deep. It was as if the stone were trying to speak, not to you, but through you. Listen, something whispered. Not a voice, not yet, Aiden. A thought in the ground, a memory within matter. And you stood still, your entire body quiet, your heart slower now, until it matched the rhythm of the earth. For a moment, everything vanished. Time, sound, boundaries. You were only pulse, and the pulse was the world. When you opened your eyes, the frost was gone. But on the wall, the mark remained. 3 dots, a circle, the sigil of the watcher. You didn't know what it meant, but you felt the world begin to move again, from within. Scene 2. The language of frost. You followed the sound without thinking. It wasn't direction, only pull, as if the earth carried a meaning it couldn't say aloud. The streets were empty. Frost crept along railings and facades, drawing lines that looked like words but vanished before you could read them. Each time you breathed out, the mist settled into a pattern before you, as if the air itself were trying to explain something. In a shop window, you saw your reflection, but behind it there was movement, a faint shimmer, a being of mist and shadow. It didn't look at you, yet you felt its attention, like a memory waiting to be remembered. You whispered without knowing why, "I hear you." No one answered, but the frost on the glass trembled lightly. A language without words, a conversation between stillness and breath. You walked on. The ground began to glitter in small circles of light, and between them, dark shapes, slow and heavy. You understood it was the same movement you'd heard beneath the ground. The Watcher's breathing had awakened something else, the echo of the shadow. Not evil, only what hides when everything becomes too bright. You pressed your hand to a metal door. The cold stung your fingertips, but the pain was welcome. It made you reel again. When you pulled your hand away, a mark remained in the frost, not of skin, but of 3 dots and a line. The rhythm of a heart, frozen in metal. You stopped. The air thickened. Someone was breathing near you, but no one was there. The movement in the shadow took shape for an instant. A contour, larger than you, yet fragile, like an animal hesitating to approach water. You thought the word demon, but knew at once it was wrong. It wasn't evil. It was grief that hadn't yet found its language. You stepped closer. The ice on the door began to melt slowly, droplets falling in time with your heartbeat. When the last drop fell, the shadow was gone. Only warmth on the metal remained. That was when you understood. The frost was speaking, not to you, but through you. Every melting flake, every soundless motion was a word in a language of stillness. And you, unwittingly, had just spoken your first word back. Scene 3. The Watcher's Gaze. You followed the frost toward the square. It gathered into thin trails of light, as if the ground itself were drawing your path. The square was empty. At its center stood an old statue, a figure of stone without a face. You had seen it 100 times before, though you couldn't recall when. But now it moved. Not visibly, just a shift in the air, like a mountain changing weight without anyone noticing. You stepped closer. The cold around the statue was different. Not the biting frost of night, but a deeper chill, as if it carried centuries of silence. You brushed your hand across the stone. The surface was smooth, yet beneath it something pulsed, a faint heartbeat, the echo of your own. From the corner of your eye, you caught movement again, dust, fragments of stone, light breaking into sparks. When you looked up, something took form above the statue's shoulders. A contour of light, a breath shaped like a human. It stood there, motionless, not like a ghost, but like the very presence of stillness. You knew this was the Watcher. Not a being, but all the silence that had held the world together while you slept. You wanted to speak, but your voice caught in your chest. The Watcher's gaze was on you, though it had no eyes. It looked through you, the way light sees through water. You tried to breathe. When you did, the ground began to answer, a faint rumble, a tone so low it was felt more than heard. The Watcher did not move, but you understood. It spoke through resonance, not in words, not in images, only rhythm, the language of Earth. You are alive. You do not remember yet, but you are alive. The words were not sound, they were vibration in your chest, and you answered by breathing out. For the first time since everything went silent, you felt no loneliness in the stillness. You were no longer the observer, you were part of what was observing. When you closed your eyes, the shape of the watcher lingered on your vision, not as stone, but as light turned solid. You took a step back. The statue was motionless again, but beneath your feet the ground felt softer, as though the earth itself had just breathed with you. You left without turning around. You knew it was still watching, and that it didn't need eyes to remember you. Scene 4. The Heart of Shadow. You left the square without looking back. Behind you the stone lay still, but something in the air followed. Not like wind or sound, like a memory refusing to dissolve. You walked down the street. Rain had begun to fall, small drops dying on the pavement without echo. Yet every time you breathed, they seemed to change direction, drawn toward the warmth of your skin. Far away, a sound, a break in the rhythm of rain, a step, heavy, uneven, then another. You stopped. Between the buildings in the alley to your left, something moved. No shape, only motion in the dark, as if the night itself were breathing. It stayed there, on the edge of your sight, right where the light ended and shadow began. You knew instinctively it wasn't the watcher. This was something softer, more human. A being made of all that remained when people stopped speaking with their own darkness. You took a step closer. The air grew colder, but not hostile, more sorrowful than threatening. Inside the shadow, something flickered. A pulse, a light struggling to remember itself. Who are you? Your voice echoed faintly between the walls. No answer, but the shadow moved forward, slowly, and you heard the low, muffled pulse again. Not the rhythm of the earth this time. Your own. Twisted, mirrored, like a heartbeat in another chest. You stepped back. The shadow stopped. It mirrored your motion, not aggressively, but as if waiting for you to remember something. The rain grew heavier. The glow of the street lamp broke through the droplets, and in the light you saw the outline more clearly. A figure, not flesh, not mist, shaped from everything that had frozen inside you. Eyes, or two holes in the light. A chest made of motion, and there in its center a light, small but unyielding. It struck you then. It was your own heart, reflected in darkness, not as symbol, but as fact. You felt it beating in time with your own, only weaker, like a mirrored pulse with delay. You placed your hand upon your chest. The motion in the dark did the same. Then, silence. I am what you did not say, something whispered, not in the air but in your body. The words were felt, not heard. You didn't reply. You knew words weren't needed anymore. The shadow stepped back, melted into the rain, and the world exhaled. You stood there for a while. All you saw was the water's motion in the gutter, the light rippleness, and your own heart still beating in rhythm. You knew you would meet it again. The shadow hadn't left you. It had simply gone back where it belonged, beneath the skin, where darkness becomes memory, and memory becomes rhythm.